Okay, so I'm not going to do a whole lot of video right this second. We are getting ready to leave the cemetery from walking, but I kind of wanted to show this one little thing because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, right? So on our lovely journey, these three are always right there together in the one hand, and this is how we end up tangled by the end of the walk. So I always have to unbraid everything before we get in the car to go back home. Sometimes it's easier than others. Sometimes it's a big pain in the ass. But either way, it's got to be unbraided before I can get them in because, well, I mean, this way. One tries to get in the car, they usually fall back out. So, yes. So I just wanted to show that so when I get back to the house and go to do the other part, the rest of the video, I can kind of run from that point. So, okay, and also we just had to stop at the trash can to get rid of the final poop since we couldn't all have that out of the way by the time we passed it the first time. We had to go back to the trash can once and then had to drive around the second time and everybody got a drink. And the only reason I got back on here to give you that update was to make sure that my phone does not shut the camera off before I get home, because otherwise I'll have to start all over. And, well, I mean, not that this has been particularly exciting, but the thing with the leashes has a lot to do with like some stuff that I've been thinking about lately and kind of wanted to touch today. So we will see how that goes here in about like 10 minutes. I gotta get home first. Probably check in again about the time I'm getting in the driveway, just to be on the safe side with the camera, but we'll see. So yeah. Okay, new intermission, because now instead we're getting stuck by a train. Yeah. Anyway, the cords. So what I was thinking this morning was that, okay, like the red cord of fate is the one, I believe, that connects you to the people that you're supposed to have in your life, like the meaningful soul family type connections, right? And I think it's these silver threads that are basically established between karmic connections. So I was thinking about how a lot of what we are doing here has to do with, okay, we start out with all these karmic connections, right? And we get all sorts of tangled up with these cords that, you know, we establish with the people in our vicinity. And every now and then there'll be those that are more meaningful, you know, like the Tylers, as my particular example. But a lot of what we get are the karmic cords, and, you know, we get all sorts of tied up with them. They're basically the things that hold us down to this lower density space. So, 555. Because they are karmic and not what is meant for us. I mean, they're meant, they have a purpose, they serve their purpose. They're supposed to, at some point, 444, we're supposed to be able to find a way to disconnect from them so we can get to what we're meant to be doing, right? And have the lives that we're meant to lead, the connections that we're meant to have. And so I was thinking this morning, like, the relationship I have with my mom. Oh, that was a short train. We'll get back to that mom point in a minute. So, or probably 5 minutes, but yeah. Cool, I don't know if it was there before, but now I got my little red spot back. So, great, scratch my nose and there it is. So, anyway, like the cords with my family, okay? So, now she responds. Okay. I just got back from walking the dogs, yes, but before that, I went to Greenwood to get a couple corn t-shirts that I found somebody had posted that for like $8. 2 shirts, like one was long sleeve, one short sleeved, and they look like they're in really good shape. He had them listed as fair, so I was like, shit, okay, yeah, I'm in. Because I've been looking for like more band shirts here lately. And I had also mentioned or sent a message to a girl that had a Slipknot and Korn sweatshirt available. But she's kind of like, I sent her a message asking like if they fit like a men's size or like a women's size, and she said they're technically a men's size, but she feels like maybe they fit more like a woman's size. So I was like, well, it would be nicer if they were like a size up, but I think I could make it work. So, and I skate all the time again, so am moving back into skating all the time again. So I fully anticipate getting in better shape still, so that's something that's still being worked on. But yeah, I sent her a message earlier or a little before I sent the guy the message, and I took the dogs in the car. We went to Greenwood and then came back and went to the cemetery and walked. And I just now got a message from the girl saying that they're still available. It's like, ugh, okay, cool. I think she's out in Connorsville, so that'd be a little more of a hike, but we might do it. We'll see. There was also a tank top that I really liked. So, we'll see how I'm feeling when I'm done with the video. I'll probably feel like doing it because that's just how I am right now. I did contact the storage facility to see if I would be able to upgrade to a 10x10, because as I've thought about it more and more, I feel like my dad is I feel like he's in the winding down process and it's going to go pretty quick. And I feel like I need to go ahead and start moving my stuff out, like I'm actually moving. But of course, not all of it, because there's still a lot of stuff I'm going to need until I do get out, or do have another option. But still, like my bookcase that doesn't have anything on it currently, it's just like collecting junk at the moment. It could probably go in the storage unit. The freaking curio cabinet that's full of birds from my grandmother can probably go there, and just stuff to separate out away from the stuff in the house so the energetic cords aren't still like when my mom shows up, they aren't still like making my stuff disappear, right? So I talk a lot about how it's a boundaries thing, right? They have no boundaries, so they start throwing their stuff on my stuff, and then it becomes a hot mess, and then it's like, wait, where's anything? So yeah, going back to cords with the people. So obviously, since my mother carried me, that is a pretty solid established cord, right? But in the creation of me and my brother, there were two people that were not whole in and of themselves. Hey, my neighbor's got the doodle out. Probably move to the room here in a minute. Hi. Oh shit. Dude. Puppy love. Anyway, so yeah, since she and my dad were not whole and healed people on their own or in their own right, they came into a situation not whole. That's the thing, not whole. And feeding into their toxicity were things like the bad beliefs that they grew up with, or like the, my grandmother and grandfather creating my mother and her sisters. Also from a not healed and whole space, and then my grandmother agreeing to the energetic connection to you know, cater to my grandpa's bullshit, right? So then they go together, and, you know, that leads to my mom and, you know, my dad, and, okay, his parents, I've talked about them a little bit on here. They weren't real good either. Not that they were bad people, but they were definitely a hot mess. I know I've heard stories about my grandmother and my grandfather trying to run each other over, one in the tractor and one in a pickup truck. So stories like that. Experienced my grandmother dropping a pizza on the floor and serving it to the family anyway. It was just like picking off whatever looked like it was on there and just going ahead with it. It's like that kind of stuff. But I mean, more than just that kind of stuff, because that seems trivial, really, but it feeds into the grand scheme. So these hot messes, I got my little friend here, my sister, created me and my brother, right? So that energetic cord is pretty strong, right? So that's where a lot of the issue has come in at, because it is a strong connection, because it's my mom, you know, and my dad, you know, that it's a strong connection, right? So we grew up in this toxic environment, and of course not all the memories were bad. There are good memories that we have of growing up and whatnot, but by and large it was a very toxic space, right? And I was telling my brother earlier, it's like I feel like with my dad, okay, when we started setting boundaries and, you know, started actively cutting cords on connections that are not really helpful anymore, it seemed like everybody in the family started doing a little worse, right? And of course I've talked about this with like the baby and how everybody got excited because it's new blood in the family, right? It's basically the energetic vampires ready to latch on and suck the life out of the new being that's here, right? But as my brother and I have disconnected, of course we are a good deal older than the next cousins, you know, like my brother is 15 to 18 years older than the next four cousins, and I'm 12 to 15 years older. So we had a lot of time with the toxic family element that was, well, when my great grandpa died, we had a lot of good memories while he was alive. When he died, it was kind of like everything went to shit, right? And then my grandparents moved back, and I've told plenty of stories there, so that was also less than ideal. But since, you know, our next connections were with these, and they weren't interested in raising us to have our own lives, we were raised specifically to continue feeding into the toxic. So don't eat a rock, weirdo. He was licking it. He derailed me. Okay, so we weren't raised to have our own lives. We were raised to cater to the old generations that don't want to do their own healing work. They just want to exist and not feel the pain that they were feeling. But because they refuse to heal, right, do their own healing work, their stuff gets poured into me and my brother, you know, and then like these cords get stronger and more difficult to stand up under. And of course, you know, as you know, our parents, you know, we got the cords connected with both of them, and then with the grandparents as well. But then also, like, the ones from our parents has the added in layer of the grandparental toxicity, feeding into it, or rather sucking the life out of it, more than anything. And the younger generations come in and are just food for the toxicity, right? We serve the purpose of new, fresh blood, so we don't have to do our work. We can just suck the life out of everybody else. But since they're not doing their work, what they're masking is this very miserable people, right? So my brother and I both have kind of lost ourselves to the darkness at times, and you know, I've talked about that on here plenty of times, where I invited in the demons when I was younger, the devil, if you will, because everything was already shit, and if God didn't like me, then I didn't like God, right? So I invited it in, not realizing that all that really did was disconnect, or it basically, I think I had more insight to the other side of the veil before I did that. When I did that, it kind of shut it, and then I was trapped in the heaviness of this 3D density space that kind of blows, that it extremely blows. And oh, cool, more family messages. Sorry, just that little blip is enough to like confuse me and like make me derail from where I was at. So yeah, it basically just solidified the feeling of isolation, and that there was nothing better, because I invited in the darkness, which shut off the light that I was also still connected to, right? Damn family. I hate the family chats. They just keep popping up right there by the camera, by the timer. So yeah, not right now. You just ate. Hi. Kind of stinky though. Why are you stinky? Yeah. So I feel like what I'm kind of realizing now is I feel like we all receive messages from the other side, but when we do things like, you know, invite in the darkness, it takes it down to a lower density, and it like what we receive ends up being the negative, like anything that would keep us in fear and make it so we have a hard time pushing through to, you know, to try to push to the light, right? Yeah. Might be we're on alert, but I don't know if we're gonna be barking or not. Right, but as we clear the heaviness from our systems, and of course going in with inviting in the darkness, that's allowing these karmic cords to strengthen and, you know, continue siphoning our life force until we get to the point where we can actually start clearing it out and cut those connections, and then we can actually start seeing things how they actually are. So like when I started setting boundaries with my parents, and not being around their negativity all the time, they were suddenly forced to basically the fruit on the tree is revealing itself to be not good. Right? So going back to that Bible verse that talks about how good trees bear good fruit, which is love, patience, kindness, and the bad trees bear bad fruit, which greed, poverty, selfishness, those things, the things that keep you in that negative space, the 3D density space. So I should, too bad that train wasn't longer. I was talking a lot better then. So yeah, as we cut off our energy supply from the karmic family connections, they are starting, or have started to have to deal with themselves more, right? So since I've talked about my dad name calling me and making that a routine thing, and kind of mocking me every chance he got after my great grandfather died and everything started going to shit, right? Which was part of why I invited the darkness in, because I already thought that God hates me because this is now my life and everybody seems to be out to get me, kind of a thing. And so if God hates me, then I hate God. But it wasn't the case. But I mean, for my reference point, which is my life, that was what I believed at the time. So that's where I was operating from. And now that he doesn't have access to my energy, and even back in 2023 when I first started my YouTube thing, he called me a dumb bitch, right? So I got one of my early videos talking about that after the fact. And then a lot of my earliest videos that I did, I realized that I kept going back to this stuff with my family, especially my dad. And my brother and I were having this conversation today where he wants to think that our mom was the problem with our dad. It's like they were both toxic. It's like they both went into, their connection from a space of toxicity, right? And they entered into an energetic agreement with one another from a place of toxicity, which is why, we come along and, of course, little innocent kids and trying to make sense of the world and getting bullied by the parents and manipulated and, all these things. And as long as they were able to pull us into their chaos and misery, then they actually could shift back to the mask where they seemed like they were better than they were, right? But now that they don't have access to our energy, they just suck. Right? So they're not sucking the life out of us. We're not allowing them to access our energy. And so they have to face how truly miserable they are in their existence, right? And I had to find some stuff for my dad to take to the hospital to him today. Just touching his stuff bothers me. I don't want any part of touching their stuff. I don't want any part of them touching my stuff because it reinforces those karmic connections, right? And tries to retangle me into their chaos and their ickiness. So what I was thinking this morning was how we end up with all these cords that causes us to we come here, we forget who we truly are. And then as we have the karmic connections that bind us into this lower density space and gets very difficult to get out of, you know, that's kind of like why there's so much to be released in order for the planet to ascend, right? So the more cords we have with these karmic connections, and I know that, you know, as I've always been really open, so it doesn't take much for other energies to latch on, right? And especially since at one point in time I did set the intention to, if there was anything I could do to help heal the world around me, then, you know, so be it, you know, and that was allowing my energy to go wherever it needed to go in order to heal other people, which really was depleting. And eventually, back after the twin flame thing became a thing that I was more aware of, like actually the who and all that stuff, only then Gidget got up and I forgot what I was saying. I'm gonna go in the house because maybe I'll think better there with slightly less distractions. No promises. Okay. The dogs just came flying up too. So I allowed my energy to wander off to find other people that were hurting to try to, you know, help give them life, right? But that just opened me up to being further depleted because my energy was all over the place, right? So it's going places it shouldn't and allowing people who shouldn't have access to my energy to have access to my energy and thus suck the life out of me, you know, which I feel like is a big part of maybe why that relationship was toxic one way or another. That's just, it was meant to be toxic to teach me the lessons that I needed to learn so I could get out of that situation and start making sense of things better. So yeah. Side note, I wore this shirt to the hospital today and had a couple that looked like they were straight out of church that, you know, they gave me a look. Of course, I have my Horus earrings, Eklektik shelf, and my little flippy fingers, though they couldn't see those. But I figured, well, I mean, what's more appropriate to go visit my father in the hospital? I went with my brother and my niece, and that was a good arrangement because, you know, we both told Gracie, it's like, if you feel uncomfortable, let us know and we will leave. And, you know, because of these cords, right? So, of course, Gracie's been taught that she's supposed to hug the grandparents every time she's around them, right? So that's not beneficial. And I told my brother that today. It's like, I can't stand for our parents to touch me. Like, my aunt and uncle actually got over to the hospital before we left today, and I gave my aunt and uncle a hug and just as quickly as I could because I wasn't trying to hug my father. And, you know, I didn't necessarily need to hug my aunt and uncle. I like them a little bit better. But, you know, they have gone on vacations with my parents too, so it's not that they're not also still toxic, so that's probably something else that should be disconnected from. And when I go to leave this space completely, I probably will. But yeah. So Yeah, but like hugs, that's another thing that like I can't stand this family to touch me because it reinforces the cords, right? And yeah, it's already so difficult trying to disconnect from, this entanglement, because that's what it is. It's like the cords between us like are so deeply entangled that it is hard to separate. We weren't raised to have our own lives. We were raised only to exist. And, okay, that Jerry Wise page that I found yesterday, the video, I watched it last night, and he referred to the narcissistic family super self. I was like, yes. It's like this great big, like the toxic umbrella, if you will, over the family system. And, so when I was the scapegoat, that was all against me anyway. Unless I was doing my part to, like rat my brother out and give them something to talk shit about him about or whatever. And yeah, that's not good, but the video that I talked about watching yesterday was one where he was talking about, you're not supposed to grow up and get away from the narcissistic family super self. You are supposed to, be forever a part of it. So when you start to disconnect, the family feels that, doesn't like that, and kind of it enrages them, right? Because you're supposed to just fall in line and do what you're supposed to do, which also culturally worldwide, let's just like look bigger picture stuff, is like whatever is happening at the smaller level, like whatever's happening in the family level and at this energetic level, all this is playing out on the world stage. So there's a whole lot of toxicity out there, and it's all because of these freaking karmic cords that are trying to prevent us from strengthening the chords that we're supposed to have, like, going back to the red cord of fate, and the stands with you, that connects you to people that you're supposed to have in your life. So yesterday I mentioned this one little vision that I had the other night, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about that one. So I mentioned a few times I had these series of knowings when I was in high school, right? And of course, the first was that Tyler was going to die in her mid-30s. The second was I was going to be 40 before I started to make sense of what was going on in my life. And the third was there was a group of 5 guys that's really important to me that, like, we're here to change the world together, right? So for a while, I thought that was somehow connected to the relationship that I had in high school, because that was the only thing I had at that point. It was like a glimpse of what was supposed to be, but it wasn't it, right? So, and the silly thing is, like, I knew that boyfriend and I were not supposed to be together, and I tried to end that connection multiple times, but it got to a point where it was safer to be in the connection than to be assaulted by the people who, were kind of against my energy otherwise, because at least he was an ally, I guess, in the time that I was having to deal with a bunch of shit with the people in school. So, and to keep his sister from being one of the shits that I was dealing with in school, it was easier for me and him to be together. Because she did end up in my section in marching band, which is aggravating because she played clarinet originally and I was in the pit, but then when she joined pit so she could be in drumline, then she carried that over and did pit for marching band. So then it was just, well, I don't want to be miserable forever, so we're going to go back into that relationship so she shuts up. And, it's just literally things like that that take you to the point of losing parts of yourself. Because I knew that relationship was not it, but I stayed in it because it was safer for the time. and made my life a little easier for the time. But it was still, I knew it wasn't it, so it was like, but anyway, since that was my reference point, it's like this group of 5 guys, there's one that like the connection is more close, I guess, deeply held, whatever, than the rest of them. So of course it made sense that I was dating a guy in a band, and the other guys in the band, were, they were them good Christian boys. So so back at the time, that would have made sense for me that was supposed to change the world, right? But yeah, not with what I've learned. But the bigger thing on that end was I knew it couldn't be that group because, okay, back then, Brandon and I mean, we got along, but we weren't friends by any means. It's like casual passing acquaintances kind of thing. And it was okay, we got along, but, we're not trying to be friends. Paul and Tyler I loved, but then Steve was the one that he hated me, and it was kind of weird because he was really good friends with the guy I was dating. So it was like, but yeah, he hated me. Always knew that about him. And then as time goes by, Tyler dies, and then Paul moved to Colorado, I think. So it's like everybody just anyway, but it's like, yeah, that can't be it. But like I always just saw this group of these 5 dudes that I knew were really important to me. Well, so my little vision the other day, I was thinking through this connection, and I was thinking through the chords, and I see myself having this conversation with these guys and talking about, like the red chords, and obviously twin flame, that's going to be the most important, but the others, soul family, still very important. And so in this vision, like I'm trying to demonstrate something, and the only way I can think to do it is like have them stand around me, and there's one of them standing by one foot, because I got like my arms out and my feet kind of down, like the image that I forget what it's called, but I see it a lot. That's got the guy with the outstretched arms and his his legs and then his head, blah blah blah. But okay, so 2 of them. Okay, so I've talked about how there were 2 guys that seemed also much more closely connected to me somehow. And last year, when I was on a treadmill at the gym, I had I turned the treadmill on, and right as I'm getting ready to step on the treadmill, as it, it's moving, I suddenly flashed to being in this other space with these 2 guys, and we're just looking at each other. And then I hear myself say, "What, you don't recognize your sister because you've never seen her in the physical before?" And then it was like, oh, okay, so it's like some kind of close connection like that, right? So that makes sense, right? So the 2 guys that I didn't have that close of a connection to in that, in the little vision thing, they're one standing by one foot, the other standing by the other foot, and then of course the brothers are standing like at, by my hands, and then twin at my head, right? So, and of course, they start standing up, so it's far away. And I see myself, and I'm just kind of looking up toward this light, right? And then I've talked about, of course, he's a Leo. Leos are like the sun anyway, and going back to the yin yang thing. Okay, this yin yang thing that I have up here. Never mind my wind chime in front of it. I like that example because, let me just fucking turn it this way so I can zoom in on the damn thing. If I, here. Right. because I saw this on Etsy, LunaWoods or LunaArt, or I don't know. I'll have to look it up and put it or mention it. But on Etsy, I saw this image and I was like, my phone was still in sleep mode and I wasn't fully awake. But I see this image and just the way the white is the border, it really struck me. And I was like, I have to have this in my space. And that, of course, I think, okay, the masculine is the light, the feminine is the dark, right? So, of course, there is the darkness in the light, there is the light in the darkness, right? So, in this vision, I'm looking up, and I see, you know, like the twin flame as like this light, this far away, and he's there, but he's like this light to me, right? And so, you know, I kind of feeling through the vision, it's like I feel like I'm planted in this space, right? So they are here and I'm like this seed planted in the dirt. And as it might be easier to find it from my journal, but I'm gonna try to make it through this. Okay, so at some point along the line, of course, they have their own thing going on. They're talking up above me, you know, in this space where I'm planted, and you know, like I've realized a while back that it's like, through music, they're doing all this networking and, you know, they're learning from each other, they're growing, and basically they're the roots, and, you know, they're learning things, networking with the others like them, and because of what they're learning, they're stepping more into another level of themselves. Now, I also talked about last year how I had this dream where, okay, it's the same dream where the girl told me that it was time to start sharing the story I already had to share before more of my mission would be revealed, right? So then, the next part of the dream, you know, of course, you know, I've talked also about how, like, I saw on these walls, it was like, it felt like travel memories for him, but it was like in this camper van. It was like a gray camper van. And I had a hard time, like I wanted to look and see what was going on these images that were like playing out on the walls, but it's like I felt like I wasn't supposed to have access to that information, even though it's broadcasting on the walls all around the building. So, you know, I still couldn't bring myself to really turn my attention there. But, you know, that goes back to, I think that was not a memory so much as something that was coming up and happened recently. But since I wasn't really paying attention to it and like really honing in on any of the details or anything, I can't say for sure. What I can say was there's like this next scene, I was crawling through, it's like this really crowded space with like these old dark wood walls and like posts in the middle, like square posts in the middle of the space. And I'm crawling through trying to go unnoticed by this crowd of people, right? And interestingly, I'm crawling through on like one of those, like the thick comfort mat type things. And as I'm trying to crawl in and avoid being detected by this big group of people, Twin Flame comes in, crawling on one of these comfort mats from another direction. And as soon as we cross paths, we're up and we're like running, and like he seems to know more about our mission than I do. Right? So, yes. So, take me back to, you know, my yin yang for a minute. You know, when I've talked about painting this space and how, you know, the walls have been, let me go back to the, zoom out. Like all this is like that kind of stuff never mind my sock drawer, was in my system, right? You know, as the feminine aspect kind of wanders all, it's the flow, it's, you know, it's basically looking for the frame. And so other people's chaos became my chaos, right? Those chords that get established, it's like suddenly I'm picking up other people's chaos and it's going in my system. And then like it was always, I know I couldn't do anything, but at the same time it's like I just felt overwhelmed and wiped out all the time, right? So going, okay, with the twin flame connection, you know, when I started realizing they're thinking about the yin yang image, then I was thinking that, you know, okay, if the white part, the light part is the masculine and the dark part is the feminine, then there's in this dude, there's the white boundary around the thing, right? So if I, you know, when I find my frame, which I already have part of that with me too, I have to find it in myself first, right? So once I found my frame and started connecting with twin flame at this energetic level, then I've started being able to, it's like, I feel like I have a boundary now, you know, and like one of the big examples for that was the celebration of life I went to last year in June for the family friend. And the couple that my mom and dad and the other couple had spent a lot of time with when I was really little, you know, they were there at the thing. And since I was sitting with my parents at this table, they were there too, and they joined us, right? And the sun's beating down on this guy, and he starts getting real hot, so he moves to the other side of this canopy, you know, where me and my mom are. And just in him standing there, he wasn't doing anything to make me feel to actively make me uncomfortable. He wasn't even talking to me. But while he was standing there, I started getting really uncomfortable. It's like, I don't like this. I don't like him being this close to me. And so I was trying to think about how to fill up the space, right? Like use my energy to fill up the space and protect me more, right? In that moment, because I felt like his energy was imposing on me, right? And so everything I'm thinking doesn't really, you know, make it feel like anything's working. It's still uncomfortable. So finally, I just, you know, I'm thinking that my heart space, you know, twin flame connection, and I just say to myself, hey, Rick, he's making me uncomfortable. Is there anything we can do to make him go away? And I kid you not, within like, he was like within 30 seconds, he was back in his chair, and within a couple minutes, he started looking really panicked and looked at his wife and said, "We need to leave." I was just like, wow. But it was literally just like that quick. It's like as soon as I requested assistance, which also goes back to another dream where, you know, I talked about the dream that I was able to go back into on multiple occasions, where the first time I was sitting, every time I went into the dream, I was sitting on the couch with my ex. And the first time I had so much anger toward him. Ziva was sitting on my lap and she was like snarling and snapping at him. And I don't remember if it was that time or if it was the next time where I was aware of the twin flame in that space. And he said, "If you need my help, let me know." And I said, I feel like I have to do this on my own. So then, when I realized he said, if I needed help, let him know, then I took it to this thing, and I said, hey, help, and he did, right? This, like, energetic piece of him, you know, actually, which is me, did that, right? So, okay, going like with the yin yang, the light and the dark, heart space, right? So I've always felt like I was very disconnected from my heart in my lifetime. And unsafe because of the world around me. But I realized that once I found out who he is to me and like the connection, then it was like I finally found my frame. So the masculine is rules over the bottom 3 chakras, right? So root, sacral, solar plexus, dealing with safety, security, self-expression, sexuality, that kind of stuff. And the feminine rules over the upper 3 chakras, which is, you know, throat, third eye, and crown. So, you know, like, which is very much why the world and like religion tries to divide us out into the 2 separate beings, because it keeps us from being able to step into wholeness, which, I mean, is basically the end of the dualistic system. Because, you know, once we start stepping into our wholeness and realizing we are all divine beings and divinely connected and all part of the whole, and as a whole, they can't touch us, right? So, like, the ones that are so hell-bent on keeping us divided, you know, thinking back to the comment I made a few weeks ago about congratulations, you've elected a penis with no heart. So, but basically, like, that's the patriarchy, right? It's, you got your dick in office, and he doesn't give a shit about women, even though he puts a bunch of women in there to make it look like he gives a shit about women, just so, like, that's just a mask for what's actually going on, all the shady shit beneath the surface, right? So the dick is in office, and the people that are, you know, all hell-bent on staying in the dualistic system are all about it, because, you know, basically they're using it to bully and kill off others, right? I mean, that's like, you know, Christianity's notorious for this shit. I mean, there's the Crusades and stuff, and right? And if you look, okay, Monte Mader knows more about this stuff, this, you know, the Holocaust viewpoint of it than I do. I was watching something she was talking about earlier where she mentioned that Nazi Germany was a Christian nation. So basically everything that happened there, I mean, it's like present day here now. So it's all, you know, the Christians trying to just throw their weight around, but acting like the victims, which is also why narcissism is such a big problem, y'all. So, yeah. So anyway, back to the visions. Right. So, okay, the one from the other day where he's standing above me, but, you know, talking, looking to his friends, right? And interacting with them in any kind of way. So something happens as I'm looking up to this light. That is him, that I did not realize initially was him, but that's always been there. So I'm looking at this light, and, you know, as I start wondering about some things and trying to do some kind of healing work and needing some kind of assistance on the journey, because, because I, you know, my boundaries were all over the place. I mean, because I didn't have boundaries, so the chaos outside of my system was able to latch onto my system, right? And thus, my badass room with the paint job, which I know a lot of people don't like that, but I don't give a shit, because I have never loved a space more in my life than how I've painted in here. And so anyway, something happens along the way, and he starts turning in, right? Because, you know, somehow the feminine, that is me, looking up to the light, which is the masculine, which is him, you know, it's like he's suddenly aware that there's more going on, and he starts to turn in. And as he turns in, you know, like, we're basically, you know, the cord is strengthening because we are focusing our energy within instead, right? So once I finally figured out that I already have this frame inside and started doing the things that I thought I was incapable of before, because that's what the world conditioned me to think, you know, then it's like, I have my own frame for this stuff to flow through, like, so for the, you know, for the YouTube channel, because that was a masculine step, starting to do the thing that I knew I needed to do is taking action. That's part of the masculine, right? So, and I didn't know what I was doing starting off, and most of the time I still don't know. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I get the idea of what I'm actually doing and how it's going to serve a bigger purpose in the long run. But yeah. So as I found my frame and I'm finally able to kind of flow through my frame, you know, of course, the masculine comes up and the feminine comes down, and they meet in the heart space, which, again, you know, because the feminine rules the upper chakras, which has to do with spirituality and connecting to, you know, higher ways of thinking and all that good stuff. That's exactly why the church doesn't want people to expand beyond bullying the feminine, because as long as you can bully the feminine, you can keep it. So the heartless dicks can be in control, right? So yeah, and so we got a whole lot of that, but it's not really good for any of us. But because, you know, they rely on the distorted feminine to allow them to continue to do their shit, right? Okay. I'm thinking about this thing that I did this one video, I think like January or February, where I got really hung up on this, how to explain this one particular thought. And I can't promise that I'm going to explain it any better, but I think of it a little better today. So it's going back to like a racial division kind of issue. I was thinking about how, you know, okay, like, think slave era type stuff. So nope, derailing again. It's like I have it, but okay, like why it's a critical element for the patriarchal stuff to keep women divided as women, right? So like, you know, I remember a time where I was thinking about, I enjoyed my guy friends more than the girls because girls were just toxic and icky kind of a thing, right? But because in the distortion, it's icky. You know, it's the talking shit about people behind their backs, like my family, and yeah, because if we realize that as women we need other women as a support, then the distorted masculine is not as able to run completely all over the top of us, which is kind of like historically what's been going on. Distorted masculine, that's whole patriarchy. Distorted feminine, that's like, you know, being the victim and never seeing beyond that, like never being able to find our power and step into our power because we're locked in this place of distortion and perpetual victimhood. But okay, so the thought, and going back to, okay, like how you hear stories of like plantation owners where, okay, the women weren't treated well. Like, okay, white women married in to toxic plantation owners weren't treated good by any means. But at the same time, they still, you know, when the slaves were being assaulted and beaten and raped and all those things, you know, there's still that additional element of this one is gonna take some work. It's like I have parts of it and I'm still trying to make sense of it. But okay, while, okay, because the white women weren't being treated good either. Remember that. Not to say that they were necessarily being treated badly in the same way that the slaves were, but okay, like the one point particularly that keeps coming to mind is, you know, if you're constantly told by this father figure, father figure, brother figure, grandfather figure, whatever, that these other people, like these servants, are not people, but then you're also aware that they are choosing to rape those people rather than being content in their marriage relationship, right? It adds a level of, not only am I not good enough, but you're choosing somebody that you're speaking absolute garbage over me. So it's like this weird little dynamic of, okay, if you're talking about these people as less than human, but then you're choosing the less than human over the ones that are supposedly human because they're at least the same color you are. Yeah, you get the weirdness there. That it's just a whole icky thing anyway. But that's why it's been important for the distorted masculine to keep the distorted feminine separate from the other feminines, because as we talk and start communicating and realizing, hey, they're the ones that are fucked up and have this all sort of, you know, are screwing everybody, then we become, if we become a united force, well, then the distorted masculine is going to have to step up and like change, even though it doesn't want to, and it wants to stay locked into the toxic system where it continues. See, just thinking thriving in the illusion. See, okay, that's another thing that I was thinking this morning too. It's like, okay, the duality. Okay, so you got masculine, feminine, light, dark, illusion, and authenticity, right? So those of us who are trying to be authentic are finding a lot more of those who are trying to keep the illusion alive are coming to attack, right? Because we threaten their way of being, right? Like their whole existence is dependent on keeping us in ignorance and divided, because going through that freaking, it wasn't like the motto of the nation, but it's actually like exactly opposite of, you know, that whole, okay, the idea of united we stand, divided we fall, because the system itself is the very thing that's trying to keep us divided, and it's going to fall. It's like it was never meant to be a forever thing. There's like, you know, it's kind of why the Earth School is so hard, is because we're having to learn these hard lessons and, you know, release the density so we can ascend, right? Okay, so, ouch, ooh, finger. Finger locked up. Yeah. Vision. So, as I talked about in many other videos, that it was like the fourth time that I went back into that vision with, or the dream with my ex on the couch. It was like the first time I couldn't get past that anger at my ex, and at one point back in the fall, I commented that my anger, I said it was like this red and black, and it's like, ooh, what does that mean? It's like, well, red and black goes to safety and security. It's like, so dealing with him, I realized, it was like the very root of my being was being assaulted by his energy, and it was like he was a leech on my energy. So once I realized that, and once I started turning to twin flame in dream space, saying, hey, help, and then in life space and seeing it play out in front of me, that was like pretty damn cool, honestly. Then the next, there was, okay, the last of the dreams, like, as the next, I think, or like among the next, was we got to a point initially, it's like he was talking to the other guys in this band that were on stools behind the couch, right? So they were at a higher level than the level I was at, and it's like they were looking ahead, and it was like it felt like a funeral home kind of a thing, but like there was a TV, and like you could just see the colors kind of flashing, right? So they're talking amongst themselves, and the first time I was just really puzzled why they were there. The second time, yeah, that's how it works. The second time, he said, if you need my help, let me know. And I said I thought I had to do this on my own. And then the third time, we were talking to each other, but it's like we were talking through this like fog. And it was like a really weird kind of a thing. And then I think it was the fourth time that I went into this dream vision thing, where it's like I felt the shift where he like suddenly looked at me, and it was like he like looked, it's like I just felt this rush of energy go all the way through my body, and it was like he was like locked in and aware I was there and awakened to the fact that I was there. So it's like, so like going back to the one dream where we were on the comfort mats, and then once we got going in the same direction, then we were up and running, and then he kind of aged backwards, and it's like he suddenly felt like he wasn't ready. So it was kind of like that. But then in this other dream, like as soon as he like locked in on me, and like I just felt like the rush of energy pass all the way through my body, then it was like, whoa, and so going back to the vision the other day, as he has started turning in and doing the work, connecting to his upper chakras and bringing them into the heart space, right? Because the feminine brings the upper chakras down into the heart space, and, the masculine brings the lower chakras up into the heart space, and that's where they meet. And that's, the the actual marriage that was meant, by like not that it has to be between a man and a woman, but because, you have the masculine aspect of yourself and the feminine, the masculine and feminine, and they have to unite in the heart space to make you a whole person. If you do not have the two united within yourself, then you're still moving from the distortion at some level, right? So like that's the purpose of this. So this is part of like why it makes sense that it would come through music, that this whole thing like is taking place with like all these activations and stuff, because, okay, I mean, obviously it's definitely not exclusive to men, but the men in music, if you hear musicians and artists talk about flow state's important, flow state, feminine. So they have to be at least partly in touch with the feminine aspect of themselves, right? So as he's turned toward the feminine aspect of himself and looking into his heart space, moving, that's where we meet, right? Just like he started coming down to where I was at, right? Like not like in this, the vision where I'm planted and he's the framework, or he's just like framework additionally, right? He's at my head, right? So looking into like the like the other side of the mirror, if you will, the flipped side of it, as he starts, I'm looking up into the light, and then he starts looking down into his heart, right? And then we start coming closer. So then I see like me in this planted state and like starting to rise into who I'm supposed to be, and start to grow in the space. So right, so like okay, I have paper around here somewhere. Let me find paper. Hold on. Okay, so this is another thing that I was thinking through last year, right? And okay, my drawing's not ideal, but it's what I got, so we're gonna roll with it. Okay, so I'm thinking of these guys, and okay, the band, kind of like that, right? And then I start thinking that about them establishing connections, right? So just the establishing the connections between themselves, right? So I'm looking over my phone for this, and then this, it's already connected there, and then that one connects here, and that one connects there, and that one connects there, and it's like, holy fuck. So as they connect, it's like they form the little star thing, and also, I think, when I was thinking of it, it's like I drew it that way, but I was thinking of it, it's more as like the pentagram shape anyway, with, star in a circle, because it's basically the same thing, but it's just like, and going back to the star is kind of, we have 2 arms and 2 legs and a head. So we're kind of that shape. We have 5 fingers, like just these little things like that. We talked about that in group one day too, but it's like the way I was seeing it was just, I was seeing all of the connections that they have between themselves, and then feeling like, okay, so like they're the framework, I've been planted in this dirt and, while they're doing their networking, and of course, most of them are parts of other bands or have connected with other bands, and collaborations seem like they're huge in metal, especially right now. But it's like, that's the point. It's like, we're all connected. It's like these 5 particular guys, like the first time I heard one of their songs on the radio, it was just like, whoa, and it's like, initially I was introduced to them as they were going to be on tour with this other band that I loved. So then it was like, Well, I want to go to that. Well, but then the whole COVID thing happened, right? So, and then like concerts got canceled. That one got canceled. I was so pissed, but at the same time, then this band does like a live stream thing. And then I start, I randomly get to a point where I feel like I'm supposed to get on Instagram, even though I had just said that I didn't think I needed any other types of social media because it was just a big distraction. And then I felt like I was supposed to get on Instagram. So I got on Instagram, and then it's like, okay, what do you do on Instagram? Well, apparently you just follow a bunch of people. So I started following a bunch of people. And of course, music is where we started. And then, then he does a live stream, and then I happened into that. And it felt like when I went into that space, into the live stream, it was like, hey, this is kind of a cool atmosphere. I kind of like it here. It's just like really casual. And it's like, hey, cool lights, and thinking that, hey, I have lighting like this and, my space and blah, blah, blah. But then the next time I went into one, he was wrapping it up right as I got in there. And I said something about late to the party and how am I supposed to procrastinate on writing or something like that. And he responded and was like, ooh, I've been seen, and it's like a really weird feeling, but it was like the initial connection of our energies. And then like all these dreams start happening and like all this weird shit starts falling in or like starts taking place around me. Of course the live stream I think was 2021 and I made a joke to a friend about maybe I should manifest one of those, but I didn't take it seriously. And once I committed my love and career lives to the universe to lead, then it brings me back to this person and says, that's him. That's the one you've been looking for. It's like, he's out of my league. Like that was literally my thought. But going back to that part where my ex and I were on the couch and the guys in the band were on the stools behind the couch. It's like they were at a higher level. And I was at the lower level, right? So then, as I start looking for assistance, it's like it helps me to rise into who I'm supposed to be, right? And, of course, at the end of this, the vision that I had the other day, of course, he's like down to my level more and like we're able to see each other clearly. And it's like, happiness. But yeah, so yeah. Kid keeps licking my feet. But that being at the lower level, like with my ex, like because in my distorted state, where I had no boundaries, everybody had access to my energy and like pulling on my energy all the time, right? So that's why he had to be at a higher level because, it gave me a light to look to, right? So, and then once I started looking to the light, like the going back to the yin yang, it's like, then it's like, I feel like, once I found him within, then it was realizing that I already have this frame that I need to do the things that I'm here to do. And I will say this YouTube thing has gotten significantly easier. Although some days it's probably still really rough as hell to listen to. I know it because I listened to all of them to get the idea of what I'm going to call it or whatever and who I need to tag. But yeah. So what else? Oh, so going back to the chords, right? So with the karmic connections, it's like literally all this stuff trying to keep us locked into the density, right? And, with my family, especially, it's like, my mom's looking all over the place trying to get access to my energy again. Like, she can't figure out exactly what's happened. She just knows that she doesn't have access to it. And like, like the Jerry Wise video where he's talking about, you're not supposed to do that. It threatens the super self or the narcissistic family super self, right? So again, that's exactly what's happening on like the world stage too, is, you know, like we're starting to push back and, you know, find the stuff that doesn't work and all that crap. Uh-oh. Neighbors making noises. Yeah. But as the system is threatened, then, you know, there's like all these little like scammers that pop up and whatnot, and like the other things that are like trying to keep us pulled down into the negativity where we can't rise beyond. Okay, so I don't remember exactly what I was saying before I paused and went to the bathroom, but and got the dogs to shush. But don't knock that over, dude. What I was thinking when I went in the bathroom, it's like, okay, so basically the very thing I remember praying about actively in church when I was going all the time was, you know, for Jesus to come back and like this whole thing to, you know, the icky parts to just go away. It's like the very thing they're praying for is the very thing they're acting against. And that's kind of a interesting little layer of it, but, you know, it's like they're praying that this thing happens, but then at the same time, they're trying to resist it happening. But it was always going to happen from within. We just had, because we had to just remember who we are, right? So, you know, and as we step into wholeness, then they lose all their power. And yeah, and all the bullshit will go away because when we're not locked in the distortion anymore, you know, we're not trying to assault others to get our way, you know, because anything we do from the place of distortion is from a place of incomplete, right? And if you're incomplete, you know, then get a whole lot of toxic shit we gotta heal from. Yeah, but like, you know, also talking with my brother, it's like because our parents got together and had us from a place of distortion. Yeah, right? You know, that like their distortion, that is the place of where the abandonment wound are and the worthiness wound. You know, that's because they feel incomplete. They don't know who they are. So, and then you think that, like, how many kids have been born to people in their distortion, the distorted version of themselves, right? So it's like, it was time for a change. It's like this generation is specifically here to transmute this shit and to cut these old karmic ties that are not doing anything but keeping us held down so we can't rise together. But as we start cutting the cords with the toxic karmic connections and not being attached to, you know, like when my mom starts getting all wound up because I'm able to stay detached from her anxiety and she can't pull me into her chaos. She doesn't get it, but she don't like it. She just knows I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? But, oh God, how miserable it's been though. You know, like I said, I've said many times now, it's like this whole life is just a reference point. It's like we are all aspects of the divine here to, you know, learn more about itself, right? So everything that we learn from this existence now is taken back to the collective, right? It's our reference point, our story. So as we share it with others, then we can kind of learn from each other too, right? Every time I wrap it up, I feel like I come up with something else, but it's like at the same time, every time I start threatening to wrap it up, then I like drag on for a while longer. Hey, it's 5:55. That seems like a good time to end. And maybe see about going and getting a couple Slipknot and Corn shirts. We'll see. Yeah. 5:55. So as always, I appreciate you. Until the next time. See ya.